What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Ralph's Real Review, where today we are going over The Rescuers, and I hope you guys are ready for controversy because this video might be divisive. If you're not familiar, we are going through each and every Disney Pixar animated feature and ranking them among 7 categories, placing them into tiers, and trying to determine what are the best Disney movies of all time. If you're interested in that content and all movie reviews to come in 2025, go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you can keep up to date. Let's review. The Rescuer starts off with a young girl named Penny as she is trying to escape the watch of Madame Medusa, who is willing to risk Penny's life to find the world's biggest diamond. Penny sends a message in a bottle for help, which comes across the ocean to the Mice Rescue Aid Society in New York. Miss Bianca and Bernard go off to save Penny, and after going on their adventure, they do ultimately defeat Madame Medusa and save Penny, who gets adopted and returns a diamond. In the animation department, I have The Rescuers very low. In fact, I have The Rescuers as low as I can have it at 23rd right now, and I think it's important to provide some context to that ranking. Do I think The Rescuers is the worst animated movie to this point? Not really. However, it is the movie whose animation I personally dislike the most, and upon doing research, maybe I can provide context as to why. This movie was a real changing of the guard between Disney's 9 old men and the new batch of animators that would go on to work throughout the Renaissance. This movie was also Wolfgang Reitherman's last as director, more on that in the historical significance section, but there was also new animation technology that started with this film, and I personally did not like it. It stood out to me how much I disliked it, and I felt this movie looked very dark and dreary throughout. I thought the backgrounds looked bleak, the art style just wasn't for me, so I have to put The Rescuers this low. I did not find it visually appealing in the slightest. In fact, I actually thought for me, it was visually repulsive. In the storytelling department, I have The Rescuers at 22 right now, behind The Sword and the Stone and only ahead of Saludos Amigos. Again, probably a controversial ranking, but I felt this was an adventure movie without too much adventure. A large majority of the film takes place in a swamp, and I don't feel like they did a good enough job of keeping the story moving. It felt like they dragged out that middle section between Bernard and Miss Bianca getting to the swamp and ultimately escaping with Penny. All the action that was in there just wasn't engaging to me personally, and then the use of music here was a start, but again, it didn't hit for me. More on that momentarily. In the character department, I do have The Rescuers at 17th, behind Robin Hood and ahead of Fun and Fancy Free. To me, there's only 4 characters worth talking about in this movie, and that's the 2 leads, Bernard and Miss Bianca, the antagonist, Madame Medusa, and the orphan girl, Penny, that they're trying to rescue. Bernard and Miss Bianca I felt were fine. Miss Bianca more charming than Bernard, but I feel as a tandem they were okay. Nothing too special out of the both of them. Penny was a cute and feisty orphan, definitely a character fit for the role, but not memorable in the grand scheme of Disney characters. But Madame Medusa I do find to be severely underrated. When watching this movie, her character did feel all too familiar, and I thought she was going to be a character study for an Ursula later, like she was moving into the new era of villains with some remnants of the old. And I found it interesting in my research to find out that Cruella was supposed to be the main villain in this movie, which made total sense. Madame Medusa is, in my opinion, the most evil villain we've gotten to this point. While murder is not new for Disney, seeing her shoot at a little orphan and willing to drown her in a hole was a new level of evil that took me back. So while she's a strong and underrated character, she's not on the icon level of anyone above her, and neither is anybody else in this movie, so it sits at 17. In the Disney factor category, I have The Rescuers in dead last again, and while I feel bad for this ranking, I do stick by it. The Rescuers is another great example of the difference between a good Disney movie and a good movie made by the Disney company. It felt very apparent to me out the gate that Disney was trying something different here. The best way I can explain it is that in the past, it felt like Disney had really been trying to tell stories. This felt like Disney was trying to make a movie. The music was different, the tone was different, the writing was different. Nothing about this movie felt like a Disney movie, and while that isn't necessarily a bad thing, it is something to note as we're trying to rank the best Disney movies and not the best movies made by Disney. You could argue this is a changing of the guard from the Silver Age to the Renaissance, or at least the beginning of that transitional period, but right now it's stuck in no man's land of not quite grasping the identity of either of those two things fully. When it comes to music, I do have The Rescuers at 19th, ahead of Bambi and behind Ichabod and Mr. Toad. This movie doesn't do anything special in this category in terms of having songs I love or songs I hate. The songs are just there. Sometimes I feel they were there unnecessarily, which if you get anything from this category and series, you know that annoys me. I will say this is a turn away from that orchestra style music, which I think will push us forward into the new age of Disney music we all love today, so that's worth mentioning. But again, starting something new doesn't quite mean you did it right. So I have music at 19. In box office success, The Rescuers comes in 12th with $226.7 million adjusted for inflation. While it did outgross Robin Hood by about $100,000, I gave Robin Hood the edge because The Rescuers got 3 releases to pad those numbers, even though Robin Hood only had the 1. Not much to report here. This movie was wildly successful at the box office and with critics, which again was a huge deal for the company post Walt's death. And yeah, that's where it stands. When it comes to historical significance, The Rescuers comes in at 13th, right ahead of 101 Dalmatians and behind Fantasia. And this ranking was actually difficult because the real beauty of this movie isn't really from anything that it produced directly or how the company used it, but more so for what it represents. This movie was the turning point from the company from one era to the other, moving, like I said earlier, from that silver era filmmaking to this transitional period. Some people would say that we're in the middle of the Bronze era, but I don't really view it that way. Regardless, we are looking at the last movie headed by Wolfgang Reitherman, who had directed really everything from Sleeping Beauty on, and then again the last movie for Walt's 9 Old Men. They tried new animation techniques, they changed the music, they really broke away from what we knew was successful, and while I don't believe they nailed it in this movie, they set the groundwork for what was to come just 5 releases later with the real game changer in The Little Mermaid. So that's why I have it there. That takes us to our tier ranking, and while you may expect me to put The Rescuers in that skippable category, I'm actually going to put it on the back end of the Disney diehards category, purely based on the historical significance. Just watching the movie, I was ready to put it in skippable, but understanding why I felt the way I felt with what was going on behind the scenes, I would tell the truest of Disney diehards this is worth a watch as the template for what would be to come moving forward. Not just any Disney fan, but the diehards of all diehards, there's definitely something for you here. That's going to do it for today's episode, guys. If you haven't yet, please subscribe so we can continue to grow our community. Leave a comment telling me your thoughts on The Rescuers. Do you think I'm out of my mind for this one? Do you think I got it right? Be sure to let me know. Share with your friends who would like this content, and don't forget to follow me on TikTok for first access to my rapid reviews. Thanks, guys.